and observatory instances. However, with the fall of the government, led by Đorđević, everything changed. In 1900, to the large school at the observatory. This one, however, to torment further than the city. The meteorological station observatories that he established throughout the interior of Serbia received some help from local self-governments, as we would say today, or from the ones of the time. Servant. But all of that is insufficient, and it was simply very difficult to maintain the work of those stations. In 1902 a law on printing was passed. The king confirmed that decision. However, the university never received the funds needed for the press. And Nedeljković nevertheless managed to launch a newspaper in French in 902, which was extremely praised in the world and well used by the greatest authorities of that time. In 1903 I said that he acquired a seismograph for the observatories of the devil. Was a newspaper measurements as far as seismology was concerned. It was developed by his assistant Jelenko Mihailovic, while Nesa Petrovic was mostly involved in geomagnetic measurements. In response to Nedeljkovic's extremely positive report on his work for the period from 1899 to 1903, Stanojevic unfortunately printed a booklet in which he tried, in an inappropriate way, to ruin the reputation of the obvious results and successes of this deserving man. The second presenter, Alexander Tipa, I think his name was this one, is a completely different view. He evaluates that report in the most positive sense, these and other personal, so to speak, animosity between these two men of very similar professions have certainly done a lot of harm to the development of these sciences in our country, so it is not only the damage that was caused to Professor Medakovic by his fellow writers, but also the damage that was caused to Alexander Braze himself. The university most often did not have an understanding of the real needs of the observatory and its stations. He believed that it was enough for students to be trained at the observatory. Science for the sake of science did not interest Đorđević. He wanted meteorological movements in Serbia. In addition to that, he also wanted to acquire certain astronomical instruments that would enable the triangulation of Serbia, or rather measurements that would enable, so to speak, cartography to be done. After the wars of 912-913, the number of stations was greatly reduced. In the newly liberated territories, Nedeljković was trying to open new stations. The War of 1914 disrupted all of that. Nedeljković spent the war at the observatory until 1915. Then he urgently left by order. Observatory at the moment when the bombs were already falling. This one was about 50 meters from the observatory and through Aleksandrovac, Raska, Mitrovica, Prisren, Pekroza, Buram, Podgorica, Skada, passing through the Alkoban Golgotha. This one met up somewhere there with his son, Alexander, so that he, his wife and Alexander crossed the Albanian Golgotha, later receiving deserved Algonquin memorials and the purchase of new equipment. Nedeljković tried immediately after the First World War because the observatory was looted and partially destroyed only thanks to the fact that the observatory director Konrad Seneca Nedeljkovic's work was preserved. The library and archives of the conservatory were almost destroyed and taken away. Turning to the university, Nedeljković realized that nothing would be done. He tried to make a list of the necessary equipment, to use his military connections, so to speak, and the friendships he had made in Corfu. Because he worked there, among other things, as a codebreaker for the needs of the army. He was close to people from the Ministry of the Army. However, it was clear to me after all possible attempts that the only way for the observatory to get something new in terms of equipment was through war reparations. Then Nedeljković organized a meeting with the military leadership at which a decision was made to build a new observatory first and foremost. Fundamental astronomical measurements, which would be according to his vision either on the sea or on the horizon, and in astrophysical observatory somewhere in the coastal area or on one of the islands. Nedeljković managed to complete through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs what he could not through the university. These military connections were very useful to him. The connections he had at that time, the decisions made at this meeting, and the connection with Pasek himself, so that he received practically unlimited opportunities for the acquisition of instruments. Here are shown only some of the instruments on the basis of which the Belgrade Observatory was later built. And Nedeljković unfortunately retired 24 years later, for political reasons that are not entirely clear to us. The crowning glory of it all was the greatness. This retirement hit Nedeljković as a man very hard, and after that, he never set foot in any observatory in the world, not even this one, which was built practically thanks to his instruments. Apart from the instruments that were brought to his prison at the observatory, domes were brought there. This one also brought office furniture, a bunch of books, a printing press, a lot of equipment. Our instruments and the Military Geographic Institute, and the observatories in Zagreb and the Ljubljana observatories. I would roughly end with this. Here we see the last slide from this presentation. Unfortunately, Nedeljkovic's 2 daughters died of diphtheria right at the very beginning when he moved into that new observatory building. This 901 and 92 years. He was survived by his son Alexander, who was a graduate and a lawyer and the general secretary of the post office for a while. The father was angry with his son. He died a year later. They were not allowed to tell him about Sinilaj's death, but they deceived him not to come because of his astonishment. Atamania lived for another 9 years and had it in 1979. Nedeljković moved out of the observatory into an almost unfinished house which was located in Debinje, Rebi Todri Street, and there together with Svetodin Radenković he spent his last days dealing with compensation. Growing roses fruta he spent some time in Karlovy Vary. Winter in Nice. All in all, a man who owed us a lot in every way, and to whom we have left a lot of soul. I think a lot should be done to somehow valorize this man in the right way. Thank you all.